The funeral was everything money could buy. White roses cascaded down marble columns. A string quartet played softly in the garden. 200 guests dressed in black stood in respectful silence around the mahogany casket. Margaretchen lay perfectly still inside, her red hair arranged just so, hands folded across her chest. She looked peaceful. She looked dead. At 42 years old, Margaret had built an empire. Her tech company had changed how the world communicated. She'd been featured on magazine covers. Her name meant success. But none of that mattered now, or so everyone thought. Her husband Richard stood closest to the casket. At 45, he cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit. His face showed the appropriate grief, but his eyes kept darting to his phone. Business couldn't stop, even for death. Behind him stood the executives, the investors, the society friends. They murmured condolences and checked their watches. It was a Tuesday. They had meetings. Nobody noticed the janitor at first. Frank Morrison had worked at the funeral home for 30 years. At 58, he'd seen hundreds of funerals. He knew the routine. Clean the chapel, set up the chairs, stay invisible. But something felt wrong today. He'd been polishing the brass handles near the casket when he saw it. Just a flicker, the smallest movement of Margaret's eyelid. He froze, cloth in hand, staring. There it was again. Frank's heart pounded. He looked around. Nobody else had seen it. They were all too busy looking somber or checking their phones. The priest was opening his book, ready to begin. Frank knew he had seconds to decide. He was just a janitor. These were important people. Billionaires, lawyers, doctors. Who was he to interrupt? He could lose his job. He could be wrong. But what if he wasn't? Frank stepped forward. His work boots crunched on the gravel path. Heads turned. Whispers started. The priest paused. "Excuse me," Frank said quietly. Richard's face darkened. "Not now. Please. Sir, I need to." "This is a private ceremony." Richard's voice was ice. Frank took another step. His hands trembled. 58 years of being invisible, of staying in his lane, of not making waves. But his daughter was a nurse. She'd taught him things. And he knew what he'd seen. "She's not dead," Frank said. The garden went silent. 200 people stared at him. Some looked angry. Some looked shocked. One woman laughed nervously. Richard's face turned red. Security, remove this man. 2 large men in suits moved toward Frank, but he didn't step back. He couldn't. Instead, he moved to the casket and placed his fingers gently on Margaret's neck, feeling for a pulse. "Get away from her," Richard shouted. But Frank felt it. Faint. So faint. But there. A pulse. "Call an ambulance," Frank said firmly. "Right now. This is insane." Richard grabbed Frank's arm. "You're fired. You're done." Frank looked him in the eye. "Your wife has a pulse, sir. She needs help." The priest moved closer, his own fingers finding Margaret's wrist. His eyes went wide. Dear God, he's right. Everything happened at once then. Phones came out. Someone called for help. The crowd surged forward. Margaret's eyelids fluttered again, more obviously now. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics rushed in with equipment. They worked quickly, professionally. Margaret's eyes opened briefly, confused and frightened, before they put an oxygen mask over her face. "Locked-in syndrome," one paramedic said. "Rare reaction to medication. She's been aware the whole time." The crowd fell silent again. The horror of it sank in. Margaret had heard everything, felt everything, trapped in her own body, while they prepared to bury her alive. At the hospital, doctors stabilized Margaret. The medication that had paralyzed her would wear off completely within days. She would recover fully. She would live. Frank sat in the waiting room, still in his work clothes. He expected to be fired. Instead, Margaret's assistant found him there. "Mrs. Chin wants to see you," she said. Margaret's hospital room was quiet. Machines beeped softly. She was awake now, though still weak. Tubes, and wires connected her to various monitors. But her eyes were alert and grateful. "You saved my life," she whispered through cracked lips. Frank shifted uncomfortably. "Just did what was right, ma'am." Most people wouldn't have. They'd have assumed. Stayed quiet. Played it safe. She paused, breathing slowly. "Why didn't you?" Frank thought about it. "My wife died 10 years ago. Cancer. Near the end, she told me something. She said too many good people stay silent because they're scared. She made me promise I'd always speak up when it mattered, no matter the cost." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Your wife was wise." "She was. Every day I try to honor that promise." Over the next few weeks, the truth came out. Richard had been slowly poisoning Margaret with a rare drug that mimicked death. He'd planned to inherit everything, then disappear with his secretary. The autopsy would have shown nothing suspicious after burial. It was almost perfect. Almost. Richard and his accomplice were arrested. Margaret recovered fully. And she didn't forget the janitor who'd risked everything to save her. Frank found himself offered a position as head of facilities at Margaret's company. Better pay, better benefits, respect. But more than that, Margaret started a foundation in his name. The Frank Morrison Foundation taught people to trust their instincts, to speak up, to act when something felt wrong. It trained medical professionals to recognize locked-in syndrome. It funded research into rare conditions. 1 year later, Frank stood at a podium before hundreds of people, no longer invisible, no longer just a janitor. "My wife taught me that silence protects nothing but fear," he told the audience. "We all have moments when we have to choose. Stay quiet and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who decided that some things matter more than keeping your head down." Margaret sat in the front row, healthy and strong again. She smiled at him, this unlikely friendship born from the worst day of her life. Frank thought about his wife often, about her wisdom, about how one person speaking up could change everything, about how the smallest voice could matter most. He'd been invisible for 58 years, but when it mattered, he'd been seen, and he'd made sure Margaret was seen too, pulling her back from the edge of darkness into the light. Sometimes saving a life isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just noticing, caring, acting, speaking up when everyone else stays silent. Sometimes it's a janitor in work boots, trusting what he knows is right. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to remember that every voice matters. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. And leave a comment below telling us about a time you spoke up when it mattered. Your story could inspire someone else to find their courage too. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.